At the age of 58, Sophia had thought her life had come to a serene close following her retirement from nursing. She filled her days with the peacefulness of rural living, tending to her garden, reading classic novels, and strolling through the tranquil woods behind her house. 3 years had passed since her husband, Henry, had died, and although the sorrow still lingered, she had adjusted to the quiet. Then, out of the blue, she received a phone call from Noah. Noah was Henry's son from his previous marriage, a young man to whom Sophia had always shown kindness, though they had never been particularly close. Now 25, he had just graduated from law school but was struggling to secure steady employment. He was about to lose his apartment and felt he had no one else to turn to. "Sophia, I'm in a bit of a bind," he said, his voice wavering over the line. "Do you think I could stay with you for a while? Just until I get back on my feet?" Although it had been over a year since she last saw Noah, she recalled him as a shy and somewhat awkward teenager. After a moment's hesitation, she agreed. "Of course, you can stay as long as you need." When Noah arrived, Sophia was taken aback by how much he had transformed. The boy she remembered had grown into a self-assured young man, his broad shoulders and chiseled jawline complemented by a light stubble that made him appear older than his age. Dressed in jeans and a fitted t-shirt that hugged his athletic build, he stepped out of his car, and Sophia felt an unexpected flutter in her chest, which she quickly dismissed as mere surprise at his growth. "Thank you for letting me stay," Noah said, pulling her into a brief embrace. His touch was warm, and his voice had deepened since she last remembered. As Sophia welcomed him inside, she felt a bit unsteady. "Is the guest room ready? I hope you'll be comfortable," she said, attempting to shake off the strange feeling. The first week passed by uneventfully. Noah spent most of his time searching for jobs or going for long runs, while Sophia stuck to her usual routine. She made an effort to keep some distance, believing he needed his space. Still, she couldn't shake the unsettling awareness of his presence around the house. Whether it was in the kitchen, lounging on the couch in the evenings, or walking past her room wrapped in a towel after a shower, his youthful, carefree energy clashed sharply with the calm, ordered life she had created for herself. One evening, as Sophia prepared dinner in the kitchen, Noah entered, fresh from his shower. His damp hair curled slightly at the ends, and his t-shirt clung to his chest, showcasing the contours of his muscles. Sophia's hands trembled a little as she chopped vegetables. "Need a hand?" he asked, stepping closer, his voice soft yet confident. Quickly, she shook her head, avoiding his eyes. "No, I've got it under control." But instead of stepping back, he leaned in, reaching past her for a glass of water, his arm brushing lightly against hers. The warmth of his skin sent a jolt through her, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. She froze for a moment, her breath hitching in her throat, but forced herself to keep chopping as if nothing had happened. Noah lingered in the kitchen, watching her with an intensity that made Sophia feel exposed. It had been a long time since she felt so self-conscious, but the tension in the air was unmistakable. Later that night, as she lay in bed, Sophia replayed the incident in her mind. Was it merely her imagination? After all, she was a widow, lonely, and hadn't formed close bonds in years. It seemed only natural for her to feel something out of place. But why now and why Noah? Dismissing the thought as irrational, she couldn't shake the awareness that there was more beneath the surface. Something in his gaze stirred feelings long buried. It was 2 weeks after Noah moved in that the dynamic between them began to shift noticeably. One evening, Sophia turned in early, the house steeped in calm. Around midnight, she awoke to the soft creaking of her bedroom door. Her heart raced as she turned to find Noah standing in the doorway, illuminated by the hallway light. His tall silhouette cast a shadow across the room. For a fleeting moment, she questioned if she was dreaming. "Noah?" she whispered, her voice barely breaking the silence. "Is something wrong?" He stepped further into the room, his face hard to decipher in the dim light. "I couldn't sleep," he replied softly, moving slowly towards her bed. His voice lacked its usual confidence, sounding more vulnerable than she'd ever heard. Sitting up, Sophia wrapped the blanket around herself. "What's on your mind?" Noah hesitated before settling on the edge of the bed, his weight causing the mattress to dip beside her. "I don't know," he sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Everything just feels unsettled." Sophia reached out, gently placing her hand on his arm. A small gesture she had often done in her nursing career. Yet this time it felt profoundly different. The warmth beneath her fingers ignited an unfamiliar thrill within her. "You'll be okay," she reassured him softly, letting her hand linger a moment longer than intended. "It's just a rough patch." Noah turned to meet her gaze, his eyes locking onto hers. The room felt smaller, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken words. An intensity radiated from him, causing Sophia's heart to race. Neither spoke, the silence laden with tension. Then, slowly, almost hesitantly, Noah lifted his hand to cover hers. His touch was gentle yet firm, his fingers entwining with hers in a way that conveyed this was more than mere comfort. Sophia's breath caught as the realization dawned on her. This was more than it appeared to be. "Noah," she whispered, her voice quivering, yet she didn't pull away. Her logical mind screamed for her to stop, to retreat and establish some boundaries. But her body betrayed her, leaning in slightly toward him. Noah closed the gap, his hand moving up her arm in a slow, deliberate manner that sent shivers racing down her spine. He leaned in closer, his breath warm against her cheek as he murmured, "I can't stop thinking about you, Sophia." His words ignited a spark deep within her, awakening feelings she thought were long buried. Her heart raced as he bridged the distance between them, his lips grazing softly against hers. The kiss began hesitantly, as if testing the waters, but when Sophia didn't pull back, it deepened into something more urgent and insistent, and she found herself responding. Her hands instinctively moved to his shoulders as she kissed him back, her body stirring in ways she hadn't felt in years. His hands encircled her waist, pulling her closer until there was no space left between them. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily, their foreheads resting against one another. Sophia's mind whirled, trying to comprehend what had just occurred. This was wrong, so wrong. Yet in that moment it felt impossibly right. "I don't know what to say," she murmured, her voice trembling. "You don't have to say anything," Noah replied softly yet firmly. "I just needed you to know how I feel." The air around them felt charged, thick with an intensity Sophia hadn't experienced in years. After the kiss, they remained still for a moment, their breaths heavy and their bodies close, but the silence was laden with unspoken desires. Sophia could sense Noah's heartbeat racing in sync with hers. Though her rational mind insisted this was wrong, her body refused to listen. Noah's eyes searched hers, and without a word, he moved closer once more. This time he was more deliberate. His hands slid to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling gently in her hair as he drew her nearer. Sophia felt herself leaning in, irresistibly drawn to him by an unknown force. When their lips met again, it was anything but tentative. This kiss was filled with urgency, a longing they had both suppressed for too long. Sophia's hands traveled to Noah's chest, feeling the warmth of his skin through the thin fabric of his shirt. His body felt firm and solid under her touch, radiating strength. The raw physicality of this younger man was intoxicating as her fingers traced the contours of his muscles. Noah deepened the kiss, his tongue gently parting her lips, and she responded eagerly, allowing herself to be swept away by the moment. Noah's hands glided from her neck down her sides, his touch soft yet deliberate, as if he was exploring every inch of her with care. His fingers traveled down her back, tracing the curve of her spine before pulling her even closer, erasing the small distance that had remained. Sophia gasped softly into his mouth as the heat between them intensified. She felt the hard lines of his body pressed against her, the electricity almost overwhelming. "Noah," she breathed, breaking the kiss for just a moment, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she found her hands gliding up and down his arms, feeling the strength and warmth of his skin beneath her fingers. She sensed his restraint, the way he was holding back, cautious about pushing too far too fast. But Sophia didn't want him to stop. She wanted to forget everything else. Noah's eyes locked onto hers, filled with desire yet tinged with uncertainty. "Sophia," he said softly, his voice rough, "I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to do anything you don't want for a second." In that instant, Sophia's mind flashed back to her life before this moment. The quiet evenings spent alone, the loneliness that had seeped into her very bones after Henry's passing. But here, with Noah, that loneliness was nowhere to be found. She felt alive, her senses heightened, her body awakening in ways she never thought possible. Leaning forward, she pressed her lips against his ear, her breath warm against his skin. "I don't want you to stop," she whispered, her voice quaking with both fear and desire. "I need this, Noah." That was all it took. Noah's restraint vanished, and in one swift motion, he swept her into his arms, pulling her onto his lap. As she straddled him, her nightgown shifted, the fabric gathering at her thighs. She could feel the heat radiating from his body through his clothes, and when his hands slid beneath the hem of her gown, caressing her soft skin, a shiver coursed through her. He kissed her again, his hands exploring her more boldly now, moving up her thighs, over her hips, and around her waist. Each touch sent waves of heat through Sophia, stirring desires she had long buried. She couldn't help but moan softly into his mouth as his fingers traced the curve of her lower back. Her hands grew bolder too, tugging at the hem of his shirt, lifting it over his head in one smooth motion. Her breath hitched at the sight of his bare chest, defined muscles and smooth skin that felt almost unreal. She savored the sensation of his body beneath her fingers, intoxicated by the long absence of such closeness. Noah's hands slid up her body, outlining her waist before resting just below her breasts. His touch was gentle, almost reverent, as though he was savoring every inch of her. Sophia could feel her heart racing, her body aching for more. "Noah," she murmured again, her voice thick with longing. "Don't stop." He didn't need further encouragement. His hands moved higher, brushing over the soft fabric of her nightgown until he reached the thin straps resting on her shoulders. Slowly, he slid them down, exposing her skin inch by inch. Sophia's breath caught as the fabric slipped down her chest, leaving her completely bare to him. For a moment, Noah paused, his eyes dark with desire as he took in the sight of her. Sophia's skin flushed under his gaze. A blend of vulnerability and excitement washed over her, an unfamiliar sensation she had never experienced before. She felt so exposed, so desired. "You're beautiful," Noah murmured, his voice rich with awe. Leaning closer, he pressed soft kisses against her collarbone, his lips trailing down toward her chest. Sophia tilted her head back, her body arching toward him as he worshipped her with his mouth and hands. Every part of him drew her in, and the tension between them escalated to a fever pitch as their bodies moved in harmony. The room resonated with the sounds of their heavy breathing and soft moans, the rustle of fabric accompanying their exploration of one another. Each kiss and touch was infused with a need they could no longer suppress. When the moment finally arrived, it was electric. The outside world seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them entwined in each other. It was raw, it was complicated, but it was undeniably real. In that instant, Sophia didn't care about the consequences. All she felt was a vibrant sense of being alive for the first time in years. Afterward, as they lay together, the weight of what had transpired began to settle in. Sophia rested her head on Noah's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. She felt his fingers softly stroking her back, a gentle gesture that filled her with warmth. "Sophia," he whispered after a lengthy pause, uncertainty lacing his voice. "What happens now?" Sophia closed her eyes, releasing a soft sigh. She didn't have an answer for him. Not yet. What they had shared could not be undone, and the future loomed uncertain before them. But in this moment, she didn't want to think about what lay ahead. "We'll figure it out," she murmured, her hand resting gently on his chest. "One step at a time." With those words, they reached a silent understanding, wrapped in the warmth of each other's embrace, both aware that their lives had been irrevocably altered.